I wasn't supposed to be in Ohio. Definitely not in a rust-bitten town where the only landmark was a gas station that looked like it had given up sometime in the 90s. But when your older brother disappears and the only clue left behind is a crumpled receipt from Red Oak Fuel Stop, you do what you have to do. The sign buzzed overhead when I pulled in. 3 letters burnt out and 1 swinging sideways, like the name itself was already giving up. I parked my car beneath the single flickering light and sat there for a second, just breathing. Just trying to believe this was the kind of place Caleb would have passed through, let alone disappeared into. But there it was. The receipt. Date and time printed clear as day. 2 weeks ago. 3 gallons of gas, paid in cash. I walked inside. It smelled like dust, burnt coffee, and whatever lived between the cracks of tile that's never been properly mopped. The bell above the door gave a weak little jingle that sounded more like a cry for help. The man behind the counter looked like he'd been carved from gravel. Grizzled beard, deep lines in his face, and a stare that told me he knew how every bad night ended before it even began. He didn't bother asking my name, just looked at me for a long moment and said, "You hear about the night shift?" I nodded. He reached beneath the counter and slid a set of keys across to me. "You want it or not?" I hesitated. "Yeah, I'll take it." He nodded, then added, "Name's Roy. You'll cover 10 to 6, starting tonight." Just like that, hired without a single question. As he turned to leave, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to me like it was a menu. "Follow these, exactly." I unfolded the page. Rules for night shift. 1. Keep all exterior lights on. If a bulb goes out, replace it immediately. 2. Do not leave the building between midnight and 5 o'clock in the morning for any reason. 3. If you hear your name spoken from outside, ignore it, no matter who it sounds like. 4. If the coffee machine starts on its own, unplug it and pour out the pot. Do not drink it. 5. If a car pulls up and no one gets out, turn off the lights and wait exactly 3 minutes. I laughed, couldn't help it. Is this some kind of hazing thing? Roy didn't laugh with me. "You're not the first one to take this shift," he said. "You just might be the last." Then he tipped his hat, walked out the door, and left me standing there with a set of keys, a sheet of rules, and a station full of buzzing lights and unanswered questions. I checked the time. 9:47 p.m. 13 minutes to get ready for whatever this place really was. I walked around the perimeter, making sure every light outside was working. 2 were flickering, 1 above the air pump and 1 over the back lot. I found replacement bulbs in a dusty drawer beneath the counter. Changed them both. The buzzing stopped once they warmed up. Not a huge difference, but enough to make me feel like maybe I had a grip on things. Inside, I found the coffee machine near the microwave and snack rack. I unplugged it, just in case. At 9:59, I looked at the clock again, then I waited. The station hummed around me. Fridge units buzzing, overhead fluorescents, flickering just enough to keep my nerves on edge. I sat behind the counter, read through the rules again, and tried not to imagine what kind of joke this whole thing was supposed to be. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a joke. Because Caleb had been here, and now he wasn't anywhere. The first night was quiet, not peaceful. Just quiet. I sat behind the counter, flipping through an old copy of Popular Mechanics someone had left near the register, trying not to stare too long at the clock. The longer I stared, the slower it ticked. I kept the lights on, checked them 3 times. Every single bulb glowed steady and pale, casting long shadows across the pavement outside. I stayed inside the station like the paper told me to, even when I thought I saw something by the dumpsters around 1:10 a.m. It wasn't just a shadow. It moved like a person, but faster. Like it didn't need to follow the same rules as people do. I leaned over the counter to get a better view, and that's when I heard it. "Rachel." I froze. It was my name, spoken loud and clear. Not yelled, just called out the way Caleb used to when we were kids, and he wanted me to come outside. "Come out here for a sec." My whole body tensed. My heartbeat kicked into overdrive. I knew that voice, but I also knew Rule 3. If you hear your name spoken from outside, ignore it, no matter who it sounds like. I backed away from the counter and sat on the floor with my hands pressed tight over my ears. I repeated the rule over and over under my breath. Ignore it, no matter who it sounds like. The The voice kept going for maybe another 30 seconds. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It felt like the air itself was listening, like something had its face pressed up against the glass, waiting for me to slip up. I didn't move until the buzzing in my ears stopped and the fridge hum came back. I stayed on the floor for a long time. By the time I finally stood up, it was just after 3:45 a.m. I was shaking but steady enough to make another round through the store. I passed the back hallway and glanced at the darkened corner where the freezer sat. Still closed, still locked. I thought I was past the worst of it. But at 3:57, the coffee machine turned on. I hadn't touched it. The plug was still resting on the tile, far from the outlet, but the machine gurgled to life anyway. I watched as the empty glass pot filled with a dark, rich liquid that smelled like something you'd find in an expensive cafe, hazelnut, maybe cinnamon. But there was something else underneath. It smelled like earth after a thunderstorm. Wet, heavy. I don't know how else to explain it, but that smell hit something deep in me. A kind of instinct. Like a part of my brain that didn't know language still understood this wasn't right. My hands shook as I grabbed the plug and double-checked that it wasn't connected. Still off, still brewing. I took the pot and carried it to the storm drain in the back near the mop sink. As soon as I tilted it to pour, the coffee came out thick. Sluggish, like syrup. It made a slapping sound as it hit the metal. It didn't swirl like normal liquid. It moved in strange, circular patterns, almost like it was pulling itself together as it went down. Like it didn't want to go. I dumped every last drop and watched the dark streaks vanish into the drain. Then I rinsed the pot 3 times, unplugged the machine again, just in case, and went back to the front. At 5:54 a.m., a black car pulled into the lot. No one got out. The headlights stayed on. I froze. My hand hovered over the light switches for a second too long. Then I shut everything down. Exterior lights, interior fluorescents, every switch flipped until the station was cloaked in darkness. I crouched behind the counter. The hum of the fridges sounded louder without the lights. Every tick of the clock echoed. I counted the seconds under my breath. 1 minute, 2, 3. At exactly 3 minutes, I stood up and peeked through the blinds. The car was gone. No sound, no taillights, no tire marks in the dirt. It hadn't driven off. It had just stopped being there. I stayed behind the counter until the first pale rays of daylight stretched over the lot. It was just enough to make me believe I had survived whatever that night had really been. Roy showed up at 6:02. He didn't ask me how it went, didn't mention the rules or the coffee or the voice that had borrowed my brother's tone. He just looked me over and said, "You did good, come back tonight." Then he walked inside like nothing was strange, like this was all just part of the job. And maybe it was, because I came back. Of course I did. I woke up even more tired than before. Worst sleep ever. It was the kind that pins you down and drags you through hours of images you can't make sense of. In mine, trees bent in wrong directions, their branches twitching like fingers. Voices hummed beneath the ground like a choir buried 6 feet deep. And Caleb's boots, his exact boots, down to the frayed laces, stood at the edge of a cliff, suspended over nothing. I sat up in bed, heart thudding. The room was dim. Outside, the sun was already low on the horizon, staining the sky with the kind of orange that doesn't last long. I checked the time, 6:34 p.m. Still a few hours before my shift, but it felt like I'd overslept by a year. I showered with the water too hot, just to shake the chill. It didn't help much. The 10-mile drive to the gas station was quiet. Too quiet. No music, no radio. I didn't even open the windows. The road curved through pine trees that loomed a little too close. Everything felt tighter than it had the day before. Like the forest had crept inward when no one was looking. When I pulled into the lot, Roy was waiting, leaning against his truck like he hadn't moved since last night. He held a paper bag in one hand and gave me a nod as I stepped out. "Brought you dinner," he said, handing over the bag. Inside was a chicken sandwich, warm and greasy, wrapped in wax paper. "Eat before your shift, you'll need the energy." I opened my mouth to ask about the rules, about the coffee machine, about Caleb's voice, but the look in Roy's eyes shut me up. He didn't want to talk. He just tipped his hat like he always did and got into his truck. The taillights vanished between the trees, same as before. I stood beneath the overhead lights, sandwich in one hand, staring at the dark windows of the station. It looked the same as ever. Dead bugs caked on the light covers, neon beer signs flickering faintly. But something in the air had shifted. The sky felt heavier. The kind of weight you don't see but feel in your teeth. Inside, I turned on every light, double-checked the exterior bulbs, refilled the hand sanitizer by the door, unplugged the CB radio just in case. The routine helped settle me, even if only a little. At 10:37 p.m., the coffee machine clicked on, same time as last night. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I crossed the store, yanked the plug, grabbed the pot, and dumped the dark liquid down the storm drain behind the mop sink. It poured even slower than before, molasses thick. As it slithered into the drain, I saw something twitch inside the stream. Just for a second, like a worm or a root wriggling against the current. It vanished before it reached the grate, and I didn't try to look closer. When I got back to the counter, something else had changed. The bulletin board. It usually looked like any small-town corkboard, sun-faded pet flyers, expired coupons, ads for garage bands. But now all of that was gone. In their place was a single piece of paper, pinned dead center with a rusted tack, typed neatly in the same font as the original rules. New rule, effective immediately. If you find an extra rule posted in the station, do not remove it. Do not acknowledge it aloud. Follow it as you would the others. Below that, another line had been added. 6. If someone knocks on the freezer door after 2 a.m., do not answer it. Do not speak to them. I read it twice, then a third time. So the list could change. The rules weren't just a one-time thing. They were evolving, or reacting, which meant this wasn't just leftover lore from bored employees or some elaborate town prank. This thing was alive. I crossed the store slowly and stood in front of the walk-in freezer at the back. The handle was clean, the lock still in place. I opened it anyway. Nothing inside but what you'd expect. Frozen burritos, microwavable breakfast sandwiches, and a layer of cold that clung to my skin. No footprints, no shadows, no reason to believe anything had touched it. Still, I locked it from the outside. By 1:50 a.m., I had moved a stool behind the counter, angled just enough so I could see the hallway monitor. 10 minutes passed. The air turned still. Even the fridge units in the store seemed to hush. 2:06 a.m., 3 knocks, slow, firm. I stared at the monitor. The shadow there didn't look human. It didn't move like one either. It rippled at the edges, like heat shimmer on asphalt or smoke trapped in a jar. Another 3 knocks. I stayed perfectly still. No breathing, no blinking, just eyes locked on the screen. Every 30 seconds it knocked again. 3 times, then silence, 3 more. 10 minutes passed that way. Then it stopped. I sat frozen in that position until the sun began to rise. When Roy arrived, I expected him to look worried, to ask questions, to say anything. But all he said was, "You're doing fine." I nodded, my throat too dry to answer. Because I wasn't fine. The rules were changing, and whatever was out there, it knew I was watching back. The sky was the color of old paper when I stepped outside. That pale, grayish white that makes everything feel colder than it is. The kind of sky that doesn't belong to any season, just emptiness above, pressing down from every direction. I didn't go home. I couldn't. My hands were still shaking, and I didn't trust myself to sit in a silent cabin with nothing but my own thoughts. So I drove. Nowhere in particular. Just followed the road as it wound past barns and silos and 100 shades of dying cornfields. The road was cracked and narrow, but it didn't matter. I needed to move. I ended up at a diner just off the interstate, one of those all-night places with weak coffee and good pie. I took a corner booth and watched the sun try to rise behind a row of pines. The waitress called me Han when she filled my cup, and I nearly cried. By the time I got back to the cabin, I was running on fumes. I collapsed into bed without changing out of my uniform and didn't dream at all. Just dropped into blackness like a stone in deep water. When I woke, it was almost sunset again. I showered, dressed, and grabbed my keys before I could talk myself out of it. I don't know why I went back. Maybe it was momentum. Maybe it was the way Roy had looked at me like he already knew I wouldn't quit. Or maybe it was because of the freezer, because if something was knocking from the inside, then something was in there. And maybe, just maybe, that meant Caleb was too. I pulled into the lot just after 9:30. Roy's truck was gone. That was new. He'd always waited until I got there, always handed off the shift with a nod and a few cryptic words. Tonight, there was just a note taped to the door. Same blocky font, same paper as the rules. Weather's turning, stay sharp. I crumpled it in one hand and unlocked the station. Inside, the air felt different again. Still charged, still wrong, but heavier in a new way, like the station itself was holding its breath. I locked the door behind me, turned on every light, and swept the front. Replaced 2 bulbs that were starting to flicker. Wiped down the counter with a rag that smelled like lemon and old chemicals. Routine helped. A little. At midnight, the old green rotary phone rang. The one mounted near the restrooms. The one that had never rung before. It wasn't the emergency line behind the counter. This was the kind of phone that belonged to another decade entirely. I hadn't even realized it could ring. The sound was sharp and real and terribly out of place. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I walked over and picked it up. Hello? No answer. Just static. Then, through the fuzz, a voice. I recognized it instantly. Caleb. It didn't sound like it did outside the store when something was pretending to be him. This was different. Closer. Realer. Worn down and raw, but real. You're close, he whispered. Closer than I ever got, but you have to stop. You have to leave that place. My throat closed up. Where are you? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles cracked. Tell me where you are. More static. Then, they don't want you to find it. Find what? No answer. The line went dead, the lights flickered, and behind me, the coffee machine clicked on. I didn't move right away. The coffee machine gurgled behind me like it was trying to breathe. The lights above me dimmed again, just a hair, but enough to make the room feel like it was slipping sideways. I turned slowly, half expecting something to be standing there. But it was just the machine. Just the same old pot slowly filling with liquid that wasn't coffee. I didn't rush this time, I just stared. The smell hit me first, thicker than before, deeper. Like wet soil after a lightning storm. It wasn't just earth anymore. It smelled like something had been dug up, like whatever this was had been sleeping and now it was waking up angry. The liquid hissed and steamed, pitch black and slow. It filled the pot inch by inch, moving as if time didn't mean the same thing to it. I pulled the plug out of the wall again, even though I already knew it wouldn't matter. The machine kept brewing. I picked up the full pot and stared at the surface. A ripple moved across it, slow, deliberate, like something was just underneath, breathing through it. I didn't wait to find out what. I carried it to the storm drain and poured. This time, it didn't just resist. It fought. The liquid came out in a thick stream, slapping the metal grate like it didn't want to let go. A long strand of it clung to the edge before finally slithering down. Just before it disappeared, I saw something blink up at me. One round eye, dark and wet, nested between the drain slots. I stumbled back, heart hammering. I didn't scream, I didn't even breathe. When I finally looked again, the eye was gone. Back at the counter, the emergency line rang. I stared at it for a few seconds before picking it up, expecting static, or worse. Instead, Roy's voice came through, low, clipped, tense. "It's time," he said. "They know you're looking. They're trying to distract you now. But if you're really set on finding Caleb, look in the freezer." Every word hit like a hammer. My chest locked up. "Roy, what are you talking about?" He called. He told me to stop. "You won't get another chance," he said, cutting me off. "Go now." Then silence. The line clicked dead. I stood there for half a second, then moved. Fast. I passed the aisles of snacks and dusty cleaning supplies. The lights above buzzed louder with every step, like the whole building was reacting, watching, waiting. When I reached the freezer, the air felt different. Colder, sure. This wasn't cold from refrigeration. This was winter. This was buried cold. I unlocked the latch and pulled the door open. No frost, no burritos, no stacks of frozen pizza. Just empty metal shelves and a hatch built into the floor. I froze. That hatch hadn't been there before. I knew it. I'd checked this freezer more than once. But now, right in the center of the concrete floor, there it was, an iron plate bolted down with rusted hinges and a wide, circular handle. Painted on the surface in red, in the same font as the rules. Rule 7. This door is for family only. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew who it meant. The hatch had no dust on it, no frost. It looked clean, new. The handle was warm, not just room temperature. warm, like someone had touched it recently, or like something beneath it was breathing heat through the metal. I stood there with one hand hovering over it, not sure whether I was about to open a door or a grave.